Hey there, thanks for tuning in to this scary story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these tales coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get into the story. I don't know exactly where to begin, so I'll start with the day I received the file. It was handed to me in a simple brown envelope, no special markings on it, nothing that hinted at the strange journey it would push me toward. My boss, who runs a small marine salvage company, had only said, "We got a request from an anonymous party. Big payout. It's an old World War II salvage operation. You interested?" I should have said no. At the time, though, I was behind on bills, and the payment offered was impossible to ignore. So I opened that envelope and flipped through a few faded documents. Low-resolution sonar images of a sunken structure, a torn blueprint in German, and coordinates that led far off any standard shipping lanes. We specialized in recovering items from wrecked ships, but an underwater bunker was well outside our usual scope. I convinced myself it was just another Cold War relic. Maybe there were leftover supplies or equipment the client wanted. The truth, as I would learn, was far stranger. The coordinates lay in a remote part of the ocean where storms could appear with little warning. I had to charter a specialized vessel with a deep diving submersible equipped for the extreme pressure. 3 others came along, all experienced divers from my company. We set off under a cold grey sky, a biting wind pushing us toward our destination. For the first day, the trip was uneventful. We reviewed the blueprint, what little we could make out, while scanning the horizon. The blueprint labeled the bunker Station unter dem Meer, which translates to Station under the sea. Scribbled notes in the margins seemed to suggest that it was constructed during World War II, possibly by German forces looking to hide something beyond the reach of aerial bombardment. Even then, I couldn't help but wonder what was so important that someone would build a facility deep beneath the waves. After nearly 2 days at sea, our vessel's locator beeped. We had reached the coordinates. The water beneath us plunged to a staggering depth, far beyond where a casual diving excursion might go. We spent hours prepping the submersible, checking oxygen, power supplies, and cameras. An uneasy tension settled over our crew. No one said it, but we all knew we were heading into an environment few people had ever visited. The first time we lowered the submersible, the ocean swallowed us whole. Darkness pressed against the curved glass windows, interrupted only by the sub's bright beam of light. Schools of fish flickered in and out, vanishing almost as soon as they appeared. I was at the controls, guiding us deeper. One of my colleagues, Rachel, manned the sonar. She kept her eyes on the monitor, calling out occasional blips. We heard the steady hum of the sub's engine and the faint crackle of our headsets. Then came the first real sign we were in the right place. A massive wall of steel, half buried in silt and covered in algae. "It's bigger than we thought," Rachel whispered into her mic. The sonar reading made it look like an entire complex, not just a single building. We circled, searching for an entrance. Our floodlights traced the metal structure, rivets and plating scarred by decades of undersea pressure. At the far end, we found what looked like a large rectangular door. Part of it lay twisted and open, the edges jagged. We carefully maneuvered the sub through the opening, hoping the interior corridors weren't completely collapsed. Inside, the sub's lights revealed an expansive space. The walls were reinforced steel, with faded German text stenciled along them. Small pipes and cables ran along the ceiling, and the floor seemed surprisingly level, as though the facility had remained upright when it sank. We began to drift forward, guided by the sub's thrusters. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The sense of stepping into a place where we absolutely did not belong nagged at me. The deeper we moved, the stronger that feeling grew. After several minutes of exploring, we came upon a compartment that appeared to be some sort of lab. Despite the corrosion, we could make out rows of glass cylinders, each smashed or cracked by the water pressure. Inside them floated what remained of shapes. They were impossible to classify. We couldn't see them clearly through the algae and tangle of cables, but the glimpses were enough to raise the hairs on my neck. Some of the containers had compartments that seemed custom-made to house living organisms. But for what purpose? Our lights swept over a control panel with multiple levers and dials labeled in German. One dial was stuck on a setting that read, Proben. I believe that translates to samples. A chill ran through me as I wondered, were these samples animal or something else? Rachel muttered into her mic, I don't like this. Let's record what we can and get out. But we pushed on. Our client wanted evidence the bunker existed, visual proof at least, and we still needed to locate any salvageable items. The corridors branched in multiple directions. Some were blocked by collapsed beams and twisted metal. Others sloped downward at a steep angle, as if they reached into even deeper chambers. We passed another area that looked like a common room, with metal tables now covered in layers of silt. Nearby, we spotted outlines of personal lockers, each rusted shut. Everything had an eerie stillness about it, broken only by the sub's mechanical hum. Then we found something I wish we hadn't. A door with large German words that translated roughly to restricted, authorized personnel only. Beyond the door, an observation window, cracked, but not entirely broken, looked into a room sealed by massive steel shutters. Even at a distance, we could see an inscription carved into the wall inside that chamber, something that definitely wasn't in German. At that point, we decided to return to the surface and plan out a second trip. Our oxygen supply was too limited for us to linger in such a large area, especially given the potential dangers of a crumbling structure. Still, the few recordings we captured were enough to confirm we'd stumbled onto something massive, definitely from the World War II era, and containing elements that went beyond any normal research base. Back aboard our ship, we took a deep breath of fresh air. I remember how relieved I was to see sunlight, but curiosity got the better of us. We looked at the footage we recorded and realized there was more to discover, and possibly something extremely valuable if we searched the right chambers. Our client insisted on further exploration. The pay doubled. That was enough to convince the others to go back down. On the second dive, we navigated to the same corridor, making our way deeper into the bunker. We soon reached a part of the structure that felt oddly intact, as if it were still receiving power. The sub's instrumentation began picking up faint electrical readings. Lights on the walls occasionally sparked, and our communication system emitted bursts of static. This was bizarre. The facility had been underwater for decades. There shouldn't have been any power left. We spotted doors sealed by large metal wheels. Some had barely budged from their original position, despite the water pressure. We soon discovered a submersible docking bay, an enclosed space with damaged gates, large enough for a submarine. It dawned on us that the bunker might have been designed for extended living, sealed away from the outside world for months, or even years. That was when we heard the sound, an echo over our headsets, like a dull thumping. We went silent, trying to listen more carefully. At first, I thought it must be the sub's engine reverberating. Then it came again, a rhythm that didn't match anything mechanical. It almost sounded like something knocking from the inside of the walls. We followed the corridor until we reached the sealed shutters we had seen through the observation window on our first dive. Up close, we saw that someone had made a frantic effort to weld them shut from the outside. The weld lines were crude but determined, as though they were sealing in something they never wanted to escape. Nearby, a battered control panel blinked, unbelievably still operational after all these years. Rachel powered on a small device we used to interface with old machinery. She typed in basic commands, trying to override the system. To our shock, the shutters gave a groan and began to lift. Water rushed in, swirling debris around us. As our floodlights probed the newly opened space, we saw the bizarre inscription more clearly. A large circle of unknown symbols scrawled across the far wall. It appeared carved by hand, the lines deep and deliberate. Some parts had eroded, but enough remained to see it formed a sort of swirling pattern. radiating an unsettling aura. Even from within the sub, protected by layers of thick glass, I felt uneasy. Suddenly the sub's engines sputtered. All our electronic displays flickered, and the interior lights dimmed. A voice crackled in over the sub's comm system in German, faint and broken by static. None of us spoke the language fluently, but we picked out words like beware, sealed, and release. The voice repeated, each time growing more distorted. Was it an old recording on loop, or something else? The water inside this newly opened chamber was strangely calm. Our sub drifted slowly, beams illuminating rusted metal tables and a scattering of metal canisters. Then, near the far end, we noticed a small control room behind a cracked window. Inside it, what looked like a figure sat slumped over a console. We had to get closer. When we navigated the sub's robotic arm to push aside debris, we managed to peer through the broken glass. A single overhead light flickered inside, and for a moment, we could see the figure's uniform, tattered, yet clearly of World War II origin. The figure's head was tilted forward. The face was hidden by an old gas mask, partially filled with murky water. Whatever had happened, it looked like this person had been here for a very long time. While the others studied the control panels, my attention drifted back to the strange symbols on the wall. The more I looked at them, the more a sense of dread built up, as though I wasn't just looking at a set of carvings, but something aware of my gaze. Then came that thumping sound again, closer, heavier. It echoed from somewhere deeper still, resonating through the metal walls. The sub shook slightly, as if something enormous had shifted in the water. Rachel's voice broke the silence. "We need to get out of here." We reversed the sub, pulling back into the main corridor. But as soon as we cleared the threshold, the steel shutters behind us slammed shut on their own, no external mechanism visible. It happened so abruptly that if we had been even a few seconds slower, we would have been trapped in that chamber. Our camera feeds dimmed again, just as a new burst of static rattled in our headsets. The same garbled German words repeated, interspersed with what sounded like pleas or warnings. We realized this might be an automatic broadcast, triggered by the system we'd just tinkered with. All at once, the corridors around us seemed alive with movement. We caught fleeting glimpses of shadows passing by the sub's lights. It was impossible to tell if these were schools of fish or illusions created by drifting debris. A metallic scraping noise reverberated through the facility's halls, growing louder with each passing second. Even our sub's hull started vibrating, as if we were approaching the epicenter of a massive disturbance. This place was never just a military research station, our third crew member James whispered, though his voice carried clearly through our headsets. They built it to contain something. We decided to head back to the entrance, where we had first entered the bunker. The route, however, wasn't as straightforward this time. Corridors we recognized from our initial dive looked rearranged somehow. Some passages were now blocked by fresh debris, and the facility's structural supports groaned under the increasing water pressure. It was as if the entire station was shifting, or possibly sinking even deeper into the ocean floor. The sub's sonar started picking up more anomalies. The same rhythmic thumping had grown so strong that it registered on our instruments. Something was reverberating through the steel, almost like a pulse echoing in the heart of the bunker. We finally spotted the opening where we had entered, but it was partially collapsed. We would have to carefully maneuver the sub to squeeze through. The others held their breath as I angled the sub's lights and thrusters, trying not to scrape against the jagged edges of twisted metal. That's when the emergency lights in the corridor ahead blinked on, one after another, forming a path of red beacons. It seemed like an invitation, or a warning. The path led to another sealed door we hadn't noticed before. It bore the same occult markings as the ones in the chamber we'd left behind. Against our better judgment, we drifted closer. The door gave a shudder and started to slide open. Inside was a small control booth, lights still operational. On a nearby panel, a lever was labeled Flutung, flooding, in bold letters. The handle appeared locked in a certain position. From behind the door came a swirl of silt, and something large moved, just a flicker at the edge of our lights. It was gone in an instant. Then our cameras cut out once more, replaced by a deep burst of static. That sense of an intelligence watching us returned tenfold, as if the station itself was aware that intruders had disturbed its long dormancy. We made the split-second decision to ignore the new chamber and aim for the exit. The sub's thrusters roared to life. We began navigating the narrow gap, the hull scraping the metal edges. Alarms beeped wildly as the sub's exterior camera cables snapped one by one. Just as we cleared the wreckage, a deafening clang echoed from inside the bunker. The steel behind us buckled, sending out clouds of rust and debris. In the distance, I caught a glimpse of that sealed door slamming shut again, water surging around it in chaotic currents. We were free, at least for the moment. Our sub soared upward through the murky depths, leaving the bunker behind. But even as we ascended, I could still feel that presence, an odd sensation clinging to my mind. My heart pounded. Something was changing in the water, as though the current itself was shifting in response to the bunker's stirring. Upon breaking the surface, we gasped in relief and quickly secured the sub to the ship. None of us wanted to risk another dive. We began analyzing our readings, from the strange power fluctuations to the bizarre shapes on our cameras, though most of the recordings were scrambled or partially erased. Late that night, I couldn't sleep. I paced on the ship's deck, staring at the dark waves. That rhythmic thumping still echoed in my head. The few surviving bits of audio we retrieved played on a loop in our makeshift lab. German words, warnings about something being sealed away. There was also mention of a summoning, though the voices were broken by static and water damage. We sent a preliminary report to our anonymous client. They responded almost immediately, asking for more details, specific instructions about the shutters, the control panels, the sealed chambers. That was when I realized whoever hired us might not have wanted to contain this presence. They might have wanted to release it. My crewmates and I made a pact. We'd keep the exact coordinates a secret. Perhaps some things are best left buried beneath the sea. But the unsettling truth remains. There is power coursing through that bunker. Technology decades old but still functioning, and possibly an entity far older than the war that built those corridors. We left the area at first light, sails raised against the biting wind, yet I can't shake the sense that our interference triggered something. On our way home, the currents felt different, as though the ocean itself was uneasy. At nights, I sometimes dream about a hulking shadow drifting through the depths, a silent shape that rises towards the surface. I've checked the maritime alerts since we returned, looking for any sign that the bunker might have collapsed or been discovered. So far, nothing. But a few fishermen in the region have reported strange anomalies in their sonar readings, unusual swarms of fish scattering abruptly, and faint vibrations that rattle through their hulls. Part of me wonders if the bunker's shutters stayed sealed, or if they're opening on their own, bit by bit. Even now, back on dry land, I can't escape the feeling that something is calling from beneath the waves. Perhaps it will remain imprisoned, or perhaps one day, the ocean will deliver it back to the surface for all of us to see. Until then, I hear that distant thumping in my dreams, growing louder, counting down the moments until it finally breaks free. Thank you for listening. If your heart raced even a little, be sure to like and subscribe for more eerie narratives. Your support is what keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion and sometimes a curse.